To be joined by a number of people today for today's announcement. First, Taryn Bragdon. He's the founder and CEO of the Foundation for Government Accountability based in Naples. John Rathel, Senior Director of Government Affairs for Florida at the League of Southeastern Credit Unions. And Dr. Pete Wyndham, a dentist here from Panama City. So if you look at what's happening with our economy, we had, starting in 2020, massive fiscal stimulus, and that ended up being trillions and trillions of dollars over a couple years. The Fed reduced interest rates to basically zero, pumped a lot of money into the economy, and that led to inflation. And I think almost anyone who was looking at what was going on over the last many years would have said that inflation was the likely result of those policies. Now, the Fed itself, when it was clear that we were seeing an inflationary upturn, said that it was transitory, that this was something that would just work itself out. And so they did not act when they should have. They got behind the curve. And so as inflation continued to spike and continue to be a huge problem for our economy, they responded by hiking rates very, very rapidly, very, very quickly. That's done a lot of things to hurt a lot of people, but it has put a lot of pressure on the banking sector in particular. And so we had recently this issue with the Silicon Valley Bank, which was bailed out. I mean, this is a bank that had invested in a lot of long-term bonds that were no longer profitable because the interest rates have gone up. They also did things like focused a lot on ESG and DEI and didn't do appropriate risk management. So they ended up being in a situation where they were insolvent. And so the Fed, because this is a bank that is very politically connected with people in Silicon Valley, the Fed and the Treasury Department bailed it out. Now, they try to say it's not a bailout because they say it's going to be paid for by banking fees. But who pays the banking fees? Customers. So you're going to pay more for fees to do banking in order to give the Silicon Valley people a bailout. Now, there was not a systemic risk to the economy from this one bank, but they were politically connected. And here's the thing. When you engage in those types of policies like we've seen over many years, someone is going to have to pay the bill. Ultimately, the bill comes due. And so what they've now done in the last couple weeks is they've printed another $300 billion and injecting that into the economy. Now, the problem with that is they spent the last year trying to take money out of the economy with their raising interest rates very rapidly. And so just what they've done since you've seen the hiccups in the banking is they've wiped out half of the reduction in the money supply that they had worked for the last year to achieve, all to be able to benefit some of these politically connected banks. And so what they're doing is they're, quote, fighting inflation and managing the economy in ways that make it more difficult for you, for average people, but are shielding the banks from the pain associated with the policies. And my question is, are you interested in giving these economic central planners more power over our economy, more power over your daily life and your economic activity? And I answer that question, double hockey sticks. No, we cannot have that happening. And so that's why we're here today, because we've seen a lot of mismanagement from the economic central planners. It's just by nature. You cannot do this effectively without there being major costs to pay. And so some want to increase power to these organizations such as the Federal Reserve. And so last year, President Biden issued an executive order to explore the creation of a U.S. central bank digital currency, effectively converting the dollar into a centralized digital currency. And this is different than things like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. A centralized digital currency is directly controlled and issued by the government to consumers. And it provides the government with a direct view of all consumer activities. And so this is something that is being proposed as somehow being environmentally sustainable, way to increase access to consumers who lack the means to join a traditional bank. But as we've come to learn, any way they can get into society to exercise their agenda, they will do it. So what the central bank digital currency is all about is surveilling Americans and controlling behavior of Americans. And how do we know? Because we've seen this happen in other parts of the world. Look at no further than China to see the impacts of centralized digital currency. The People's Bank of China uses its central bank to monitor citizen behavior, allowing for the surveillance of spending habits and to cut off access to goods and services. You also see things in the Bahamas, where they've instituted caps on CBDC holdings and transactions. In Nigeria, central bank capped ATM withdrawals to forcibly push the use of their digital currency in lieu of physical currency. And I don't even need to think here, what are they going to want to do? These ESG factors. You go and buy gasoline. If you bought too much gasoline, they just won't allow you to use this to make a transaction. Who knows whether they would let you buy a firearm or things that they disapprove of. And so you're opening up a major can of worms, and you're handing a central bank huge amounts of power. And they will use that power. I think if we've seen anything over the last 4 or 5 years is if they can do their agenda, they will do their agenda in any way that they can. I mean, just think about some of the stuff that's happened with the whole banking situation. You know, the deposits are protected by law up to $250,000. Above that, it's not protected. Congress never changed that law, and yet somehow the administration, the Fed, the Treasury, they're removing that cap for some of these banks. And so the law is not really going to be an impediment to them if they can get the central bank digital currency. They will use that in ways that benefit their agenda. So today, we're here because we now recognize there's a concerted effort across America to backdoor provisions for the use of central bank digital currency through individual state uniform commercial codes, UCC. Uniform commercial codes intended to provide for standard governing laws for commercial transactions across state lines, and is set by an independent commission of, quote, experts to seek uniformity in state laws. Now, while legislation to apply recent recommended changes to the UCC has been introduced in about 20 states, no bill has been introduced in the Florida legislature, and if they were to pass a bill, I would veto that bill. However, given the risks associated with the federally sanctioned centralized bank of digital currency, today I'm here to call on the legislature to pass legislation to expressly forbid the use of CBDC as money within Florida's Uniform Commercial Code. This will ensure that Florida continues to be a state that supports innovation in the financial sector through the market, while protecting against government surveillance over your personal finances. But our legislation shouldn't stop there. Given the continued increase in Chinese influence in worldwide affairs and increase in plans to adopt CBDC worldwide, our legislation also prohibits any CBDC issued by a foreign reserve or government-sanctioned central bank. This will ensure that any effort to adopt a worldwide digital currency will never occur in the free state of Florida. And finally, I'm calling on like-minded states like Florida to adopt similar legislation into their uniform commercial codes, and to reject any changes to their uniform commercial code that would formally recognize a central bank digital currency. And I've already spoken with Lieutenant Governor of Texas, who's ahead of the Senate in Texas. I do believe Texas is going to do something similar to what Florida does. And if we can get a groundswell of states to say, no, we are not going to turn over this power to you. I mean, look, ultimately, cash is king. I mean, if you can hold it in your hand, you have power over that. The minute it's all digitized, somebody else is going to have control over that. And it's just a question of, are they going to let you live your life, or are they going to decide to do things to circumvent what you want to do? And think about what we've already seen in Canada. You remember when the truckers were protesting the vax mandates They had banks. Some of the government seized froze some of their banks. We believe Texas is going to do something similar to what Florida does. And if we can get a groundswell of states to say, no, we are not going to turn over this power to you. I mean, look, ultimately, cash is king. I mean, if you can hold it in your hand, you have power over that. The minute it's all digitized, somebody else is going to have control over that. And it's just a question of, are they going to let you live your life? Or are they going to decide to do things to circumvent what you want to do? And think about what we've already seen in Canada. You remember when the truckers were protesting the vax mandates, they had banks. Some of the government seized froze some of their banks. You had charities that were trying to help these guys, and that was frozen. So we've already seen government really overstep its bounds as it is in the banking situation and financial sector that we have now. Can you imagine if we went to something like a central bank digital currency? So I'm glad that we're at the tip of the sphere on this. I think it's really important that states stand up to fight back against some of the things that are going on, well, most of the things that are going on right now in Washington, because they don't have your best interests at heart. They have their own power at heart. They have their own agenda that they're looking to advance. And so I think this will be great legislation. I look forward. We're already talking to the leaders in the legislature. I think this is something that is going to happen, and I look forward to being able to sign it into law later this year. Okay, we're going to hear from some of our speakers. Taryn Bragdon, you're up.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for your leadership and the continued pushback against an overreaching federal government. Our money says, "In God we trust," but the central bank digital currency would change that to "In government we trust." It's wrong. And as the governor talked about, it will give the Federal Reserve unprecedented power over how we spend our money. It seems like the Biden administration is really taking a page from the Chinese Communist Party's playbook, where they use digital currency as a weapon of power and control. And that scheme, as the governor noted, controls where the Chinese can live, eat, work, and play. President Biden has made it clear over and over again, the goal is control. And this is simply the latest ploy to deprive Americans of their liberty. We must not allow unelected, woke bureaucrats to have complete control over our finances and our lives, further eroding our privacy and civil liberties. The governor's proposal today will protect Floridians and serve as a model for the rest of the country. Thank you, Governor, for continuing to make Florida a beacon of freedom in our country.
Okay, John.
Thank you, Governor. As Senior Governmental Affairs Director for the League of Southeastern Credit Unions, I appreciate the Governor bringing this issue to the forefront. Our organization represents over 300 credit unions in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, over 11 million members in those three states. Consumers should have a choice on where they put their hard-earned money. They should have a choice where they go to get a loan, to get their first mortgage, their first car loan. And unfortunately, as proposed, we have concerns with a central bank currency that would crush the role of community financial institutions like credit unions and our ability to serve our members and our communities as they do in this area. In contrast, how consumers interact with financial institutions today, retail centralized digital currency being proposed by the Fed could bypass financial institutions like our credit unions and go directly to consumers, meaning our community credit unions would see a drastic reduction in our ability to offer loans and lines of credit to our members and communities. Today, Americans rely on a safe and secure financial system in which funds are readily available when a consumer needs them, and this is already done digitally. Rather than continue to support commercial and not-for-profit financial institutions like credit unions that are innovating, finding new products and services, small businesses to centralize control, or This would bypass those homegrown small businesses to centralize control over the financial system. A federally adopted CBDC could provide government access to consumer accounts, increase problems with liquidity for institutions, making access to capital more difficult for consumers, particularly in an economic downturn. Fortunately, we're lucky to have Governor DeSantis, who recognizes that a federally controlled CBDC could hinder innovation, cut jobs, and risk the hard-earned money Floridians and Americans work for each and every day. And we appreciate everything he does for the great state of Florida.
All right, thank you. Okay, Dr. Wyndham.
You know, Governor, if you get to be my age, you don't need reading glasses. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak this morning. Sometimes I wonder about who my friends really are, Chuck Purdue, who somehow got me up here to speak. And the topic that the governor touched on is one that it really hits home with me. And Governor, I would like to thank you for your leadership, your vision, and for your taking a stand for what America is about. Sure. Y'all may not know, but politics is not fun. And our governor is standing alone. This is off script, Governor, and I apologize. But he's standing alone in the United States against an enemy, and it is our own government. And hearing these men speak today, it resonates with me because I've had many family members who have served in the United States military, and they served for a purpose, and that purpose was to keep the United States free and to stand for what we as a nation have traditionally been throughout the world. And that's exactly what our governor stands for. And I'm proud to say that he is my governor. And I'm proud to say that my family would be proud of you today. And most of those have died. My dad passed away a year ago. And he loved you. I mean, he said, "Where's this guy been?" He said, what took so long for somebody to wake up? You know, you asked me to speak today about gun ownership. Yes, I own guns. If I lived in California, I'd be classified as a felon. But I live in Florida. And Sheriff Ford promised that he wouldn't disclose some of my firearms, so I'm not going to disclose any of his. But in Texas, what I have, they would call a good start. They can tell us what we can buy, what we can't buy through digital currency. And it is a topic that is relatively unknown to me until just recently. I have seen in my profession in dentistry and in a gun collector, I have seen regulation upon regulation upon regulation, which just, it's almost become prohibitory to exist in the United States. And so when we talk about controlling currency, I think we all understand that it's all about money. Everything's about money. And if you control the money, you control the people. You know, our governor understands this and he gets this. And he's putting the word out. And I was glad to hear, I'm not shocked that you're leading, the way with other states. And thank you for that. But if you think about what you enjoy